Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The sound of paper tearing was not the delicate rasp I expected, but a violent, final shriek that seemed to deafen the silence of the penthouse office. I didn't wait for him to look up from his mahogany fortress. I slammed the folder down so hard the crystal decanter rattled in fear. I want a divorce, Julian. I'm done being a ghost in your house. There was no preamble, no stuttering, just the raw, bleeding edge of 3 years of neglect slicing through the air. The man behind the desk, the emperor of Seoul's financial underworld, froze. His pen stopped mid-signature. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the city far below us, oblivious to the fact that I had just signed my own death warrant. Then, Julian looked up, and for the first time in our arranged marriage, the mask of icy indifference cracked, revealing an abyss so dark and hungry it made my knees tremble. "Repeat that," Julian whispered, his voice a low velvet slide over gravel. He didn't blink. His eyes, usually the color of polished steel, seemed to dilate, swallowing the irises until they were void black. I said I'm leaving. I managed, though my bravado was leaking out of me like water through a sieve. I gripped the edge of his desk to steady myself. The contract stated 3 years. The merger is complete. Your position is secure. I've played the part of the silent, dutiful husband, but I can't breathe in this mausoleum anymore. I packed my bags this morning. Julian stood up. He didn't stand like a businessman. He stood like a predator uncoiling its spine. He moved around the desk with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible for a man of his size. The expensive fabric of his suit whispered against his frame, a sound that suddenly felt like a cage closing. "You packed?" he asked, tilting his head. "Where, Elias? Where exactly did you think you were going?" "To a hotel. Then to Paris," I said, taking a step back as he advanced. "My art gallery needs me. I need to remember who I am outside of being Mrs. Vaint. Paris." He tested the word as if it were a poison. He stopped 2 feet from me. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. "You think you can just walk out that door? After I bought you? After I merged the Thorn assets with mine solely to keep your father from selling you off to that butcher in Macau? You didn't do it for me," I shouted, the hurt finally boiling over. "You did it for the shipping lanes. You've barely looked at me in 3 years, Julian. We sleep in separate wings. We eat in silence. You treat me like a piece of furniture you're afraid to scratch. I'd rather be hated than ignored." Julian let out a laugh, a sharp, jagged sound that lacked all humor. He closed the distance, trapping me between his body and the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the rainy city. "Ignored?" He reached out, his hand hovering over my cheek. I flinched, expecting a strike, but his fingers grazed my jawline with a touch so gentle, so reverence-filled, it was terrifying. "Come with me," he commanded. It wasn't a request. He grabbed my wrist, his grip iron tight, and dragged me out of the office. He didn't lead me to the elevator. He led me toward the library, to the back wall where a large 17th century tapestry hung. He pulled a hidden lever behind the frame. The wall groaned and slid open. "Julian, what is this?" Panic fluttered in my chest. "This isn't in the blueprints." "No," he said, pulling me into the darkness. "It isn't." The lights flickered on automatically. It wasn't a dungeon. It was a shrine. My breath hitched, lodging painfully in my throat. The room was circular, the walls lined with monitors. Dozens of them. And on every screen was me. There was a feed of me in the garden, painting. A feed of me sleeping in my lonely bed, tossing and turning. A feed of me in the kitchen, making tea at 3 a.m. But it wasn't just screens. The walls were plastered with things I thought I had lost. Sketches I had crumpled up and thrown in the trash were here, smoothed out and framed behind glass. A scarf I had left at a restaurant 6 months ago was folded neatly on a pedestal. "You said I ignored you," Julian murmured, his chest pressing against my back as he trapped me in the center of the room. He wrapped his arms around my waist, burying his face in the crook of my neck. I could feel his hot breath against my skin, erratic and heavy. "Elias, I haven't taken my eyes off you for a single second in 1,095 days. This is sick," I whispered, trembling. "You've been spying on me?" "What?" "Because if I came closer," he said, his voice muffled against my skin, "I wouldn't have been able to stop. He spun me around, pinning me against a console table filled with photographs of me, some taken from a distance, some close-ups of my hands, my lips, my neck. Do you know how much restraint it takes to sleep in the East Wing when my soul is screaming to be in the West Wing? Julian's eyes were wild now, the mask completely gone. Do you know why I was cold? Why I was distant? Because you didn't want me. I cried, tears spilling over. Because I wanted to consume you. He roared, the sound vibrating through my bones. He slammed his hands on the table on either side of me, caging me in. My world is blood and sharks, Elias. If I showed the world that you were my heart, they would have ripped you out of my chest to kill me. I had to make them think I didn't care. I had to make you think I didn't care. Because if you knew, if you looked at me with that softness. He choked on his own words, his forehead resting against mine. I would have locked you away and never let you see the sun again. I am a monster, Elias. I held back to let you have a semblance of a normal life. But you want to leave? His hand moved to my throat, not choking, but claiming. His thumb brushed my pulse point, which was hammering against his skin. You forced my hand, he hissed. You asked for a divorce. You shattered the illusion. Julian, this isn't love, I sobbed, though my body was betraying me. The heat radiating off him was intoxicating. For 3 years, I had starved for his touch, and now I was drowning in it. This is obsession. Is there a difference? He pulled a remote from his pocket and pressed a button. On the wall, the monitors shifted. They showed the exterior of the mansion. Steel shutters were descending over every window. The gates were sealing shut. What are you doing? I gasped. I'm done pretending, Julian said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. The merger is irrelevant. The contract is ash. You wanted a husband, Elias? You wanted attention? You have it. He picked me up effortlessly, lifting me onto the console table, sweeping the photos of myself onto the floor. Glass shattered, but neither of us flinched. He stepped between my legs, his hands gripping my thighs, bruising the skin. You aren't going to Paris, he stated. You aren't going to a hotel. You are going to stay right here, where I can see you, where I can touch you. And if I run, I challenged, though the fight was leaving me, replaced by a dark, twisting desire that had been dormant for too long. I'll break your legs, he said simply. The horror of the statement warred with the logic of his world. Julian Vane was a man who controlled governments. He didn't make idle threats. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw the crack in the armor. His hands on me were shaking. Why? I asked softly. Why not just tell me? We could have faced it. You are light, Elias, he whispered, leaning in until our lips were millimeters apart. I am the shadow. Shadows don't ask the light for permission. They swallow it. He kissed me then. It wasn't a kiss of romance. It was a branding. It was desperate, violent, and filled with 3 years of starvation. He kissed me like he was breathing air for the first time. I tasted iron. He must have bitten his lip, and the salt of my own tears. And God help me, I kissed him back. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, surrendering to the madness. The cold, distant statue I had married was gone. In his place was a man burning alive, and he was determined to take me into the fire with him. Say it, he growled against my mouth. Say you belong to me. I gasped for air. I can't live in a cage, Julian. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. The manic energy dimmed, replaced by a devastating vulnerability. He rested his cheek against my palm. Then paint the bars, Elias. Make the cage beautiful. Anything. Just don't leave me. It was the plea of a man on his knees, despite him towering over me. I realized then that I held the power. He had the money, the strength, the madness, but I was the tether keeping him from the abyss. I looked at the screen surrounding us, the evidence of his sickness, his love, his protection. I looked at the steel shutters locking us in. And finally, I looked at the man who would burn the world down just to keep me warm. I slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket, sliding it off his shoulders. The tension in his frame didn't release, but his breathing hitched. No more secrets, I said, my voice steady. If you want to keep me, Julian, you have to let me in. All the way in. No more separate rooms. No more silence. Anything, he swore, pressing a kiss to my palm. Everything. And burn the divorce papers, I added. A dark smirk touched his lips, the first genuine expression I had seen in years. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a gold lighter, and flicked it open. The flame danced in his eyes. Consider it done. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. Or perhaps, how the wolf finally realized he liked the bite. If you enjoyed seeing Julian lose his composure and take control, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you stay with a partner who secretly watched your every move for 3 years? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Julian, tall, broad shoulders, dark slicked back hair, sharp jawline, wearing expensive black suit with tie loosened, intense possessive expression, dilated pupils, pinning man 2 against a desk. Man 2. Elias, slimmer build, soft wavy light brown hair. Artist, wearing white silk shirt unbuttoned at collar, looking up with mix of fear and desire, hands gripping Julian's lapels. Background is a dark high-tech surveillance room. Walls covered in multiple glowing monitors showing images of Elias, scattered photos on the floor, dramatic cinematic lighting, claustrophobic but romantic atmosphere, sharp focus, intricate details.